Okay, today we're going to talk about human anatomy. How to draw basic proportions and how the muscles kind of fit together. So, it's going to start out thinking in terms of the torso. This is the Bern Hogarth method. The Andrew Loomis method starts with the head and then goes to the Jack Kirby style starts with the head and the hands and works its way out. Mobius style starts with wherever you feel like is the best. But I'm going to focus on the Bern Hogarth style. It is, in my opinion, the best way to think in terms of dynamic anatomy. So I'm going to start with the torso. Bean shape. Just a regular bean shape. If you want it to be masculine, make it wider at the top, narrower at the bottom. If you want it feminine, make it wider at the bottom, narrower at the top. So, we have our torso. Now I'm going to go to our two legs. Now, we possess the general ability to kick ourselves in the shoulder. So, the upper leg, or knee ourselves in the shoulder, and the upper leg is the same length as the torso, roughly. And because we possess the ability to kick ourselves on the butt, the lower leg is the same length as the upper leg. So any size divided by 3 is roughly the human proportions minus the head. Now, say you want the head. Take your torso, cut it in half. Duplicate that size. And to the top of the head goes. Don't forget to leave room for the neck. Shoulders go where the shoulders go, in the shoulder area, like that. The length of the arms is basically defined by the rib cage. The wrists kind of go to the hips, and the tips of the fingers terminate almost at the quads, like that. These are the most basic proportions you can do. If you can do the a good silhouette and you aren't good at muscles, you'll always look better than if you can do a bad silhouette with perfect muscles. Trust me on this, the silhouette is the most important part. Next thing to keep in mind is that these rules don't work for anybody, but they kind of work for everybody. And that's my general rule in general when it comes to proportions in the human face, the human body. It's all over the place. It swings wild and it varies from person to person. So you really need to pay attention to what you're drawing. So I'm going to start where I started with the portraits. The human head has two parts: the cranial mass and the jaw. I'm going to ignore the jaw for now. I'm going to take the cranial mass and I'm going to turn it into an ice cream cone. There's the jugular. And then I'm going to take two lines from the sides of that. That's called the sternocleidomastoid muscles. They're what allows your head to look left and right. I'm going to then draw some traps. No, I'll go to the clavicle. So the clavicle or collarbone starts right up here. Right, there's the thyroid right here. Underneath it is called the arm extendo button. If we're doing jiu-jitsu, we are not. This is the clavicle. It is shaped like a bicycle handlebar. It's shaped like a bicycle handlebar from the front, and it's canted backwards 45 degrees, which means it is canted backwards from the top too. So if you look down on it, it's also canted back. It also has the same shape. It's because it's canted backwards 45 degrees. So I'm adding these traps in here, trapezius muscles. They can be drawn like this. They can be drawn like this. It all depends entirely upon your style and character you're drawing. I'm going to add my jaw in, which is the same thing we had for the portraits module. And then I'm going to throw on some deltoids. Just they're teardrop shaped from the side. I'm making it really buff too, by the way. I'm thinking in terms of Dragon Ball Z. That way we can make sure that all of our muscles kind of fit together. We're drawing them exaggerated so that we know how they work. But in all reality, nobody has these muscles. So for my clavicle, I'm going to keep it going until you have a V shape. This is how a lot of people that draw Batman determine how their Batman's symbol is going to be made. This part right here, this triangle. That is the chest part, the part of the sternum that has no real muscle attached to it. It's flat, it's triangular, it's an easy landmark to use when you're drawing, especially if you're drawing a person in perspective. Now I'm gonna cheat this next bit right here, and I'll explain how the cheat works once I show you how it works. So when you were a kid, you were drawing seagulls like this. Boo, boo, caw, like that. Those are your seagulls, right? we're going to do the same thing for the lower edge of the deltoids and the pectoral muscles. So like this. Basically the same shape, but upside down. Now, the reason the deltoid have this affinity for the pectoral and why they're shaped like this is because the lower on the pectoral, the higher on the humerus bone that it attaches to. The higher on the pectoral, the lower on the humerus bone that it attaches to. And what happens there is you have a fanning effect. It fans out onto the humerus, and that's why the pectoral is shaped like that. And it is inversely proportionate to the deltoid because they have to go in two different directions. So that's why the deltoid and the pectoral have this affinity for each other, making this sort of seagull shape. So, next up, we know that the head and the neck is half of the torso. So, double that. That's where the rib cage ends. So, we know the rib cage is going to be right here. Double that. That's where the torso ends. So, I'm going to draw another egg right here, and that goes all the way to the bottom of the torso. And I'm going to split it in half. I'm making abs. Now, the way I'm going to draw the abs is more of a way to make the abs look cool. Everyone knows 6-packs, 8-packs, everybody has them, nobody can see them. The general rule is to cut it in half and then cut the halves in half. Those proportions are wrong. You want to cut it into thirds first. The bottom third is the longest set of the abs by far. They're the hardest ones to make define if you're trying to work out. Your 6-packs actually hang out right there. Now, a lot of people don't really know too much about the obliques. Well, the thing is, the 6-packs, the abs, only have one motion. That's that sit-up motion. It only causes the one thing. You have to have other muscles that give you the twisting motion for the torso, and those are your obliques. Every set of abs has its own proportionate set of obliques. And to draw them relatively accurately, all you have to do is, once again, draw seagulls upside down. Like this. So on and so forth. This is how the guy that does all the Metal Gear drawings draws his characters. He puts a lot of time and effort into his obliques. Now, it's for the hips. Start up like this. And then what I do is I basically draw like this sort of upside down Y, almost tighty-whitey shape for the hip area. It works pretty good for me because most of the time characters that I draw are wearing pants. So, I'm going to go on to arms, right? This arm right here. Now, the deltoid terminates halfway at the of the humerus. That means that this between this and here, this is half of the humerus. So it has to be this long. The higher up the deltoid goes, the weaker the arm's going to be. The lower it goes, the stronger it's going to be. But also, the more you deviate from the middle, the less realistic it's going to be. Now, from the front, the deltoid is covered up by the bicep, which is kind of shaped like a chicken leg. From the side, you get your upside down teardrop. That's your deltoid. The deltoid, at halfway of the humerus, separates the bicep from the tricep. And then down here you have the brachialis. So, for the forearm, what I do, and I advise that everybody draws this way, is to draw a chicken leg like this. Chicken leg. It's the fastest way to learn how to do a decent forearm. Just draw a chicken leg. And then once you draw your chicken leg, you got to think about how the hand is going to attach to it, right? Now, this is my favorite landmark in figure drawing right here, and it's very obvious and to me super weird. So, your elbow is the same bone as the one that holds on to your pinky carpals. So, this bone right here is the same as this bone right here. Your elbow is your pinky, effectively. So if you keep in mind where the elbow is, then you'll know where the pinky is going to be. And if you know where your pinky is, you can in turn figure out where the elbow is going to be. So This way you know how to figure out where you're going to draw the hand. I'm going to do legs next, though, because hands are complicated. I will talk about hands in this video, but I'm going to show you how to do legs first, because legs are easy compared to hands. So we've already established we have our hip, our knee, our lower foot. This distance is about the same as this distance, right? The main thing to keep in mind is that there's an S shape here, from the outside hip to the inside knee. If you don't cross this line, your muscles will almost always look realistic. Do a chicken leg for the lower leg. And remember that the outer ankle goes lower than the inner ankle. You're good to go. So, kneecap, double knee. Now, the double knee is interesting here because it attaches to the top of the upper leg here. The top part of the double knee is for this bone. The bottom part of the lower double knee is this bone right here. So if you're drawing the leg from the side, you can easily define the shape of the kneecap without having to worry about what leg is attached to what. Just that bump is that leg and that bump is the other leg. It's that easy. So I'm going to take my muscle trick here, and I'm going to use it on this other dude that I just drew. The first dude I drew here. So from the outer hip to the inner knee. Don't cross that line. You can just make up your muscles at that point in time. They'll look relatively reasonable. Outer hip to inner knee, like that. Don't cross the line. Like Ghostbusters. Don't cross the streams. Okay, so... now, I'm going to move on to hands, and this will be the conclusion of the video, is the hands. Ooh, this, I promise you, is... okay, the red wedding ring off there. Oh, I can't take the wedding ring off there. Okay, well, I'm going to have to work around it. Wedding ring always gets in the way. It's fine. So, right now, I have my hand, the palm of the hand, down to the palm heel. I call this the meat shovel because it's shaped like a shovel in both directions. It's shaped like a shovel this way, and it's shaped like a shovel this way. It's the meat shovel, and that's how I think about it, right? Now, if you take this height right here and times it by 2, you have the middle finger. Now, this is where I'm going to differ from most traditional Renaissance teachers. They will tell you to cut the finger in half and cut the bottom half and the top half in half, and that'll give you your proportions for the fingers. Technically, they're right. They are closer in proportion to that. They're actual ratios that work for the hands based on what race they come from. But it's better to have a catch-all, which is what I do, and I do it 1/3. 1/3 there, 1/3 there. It looks way better. It fits way more people's hands, and it's ergonomically better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the middle finger into thirds, right? And I'm going to draw a line, an imaginary line between the fingers here. Fingertip, 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 fingertip. It has this nice arc to it, right? So if I take this right here, I'm going to make another arc, and it's going to be parallel to this first arc. And then I'll do another one for this one, and it's parallel to the last arc. And behold, it is parallel to the top of the meat shovel. Now, if you measure the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pointer finger, the middle finger isn't usually actually longer than the other fingers. It's just placed higher on the meat shovel. Now, another thing to keep in mind, this part is very important when drawing hands, is that the bones go this way. Right? Each finger bends, not straight out like a robot, but they splay. And when they bend, they do so in the direction of the bones that are inside of the hand. Right? So the fingers move in the directions of the bones of the hand. The thumb points at the pinky. So as a result, the pinky and the thumb have an affinity for each other. How they move has a symmetry to it, and if you don't get that symmetry, your hand's positioning will always look unnatural. These two fingers have the same interior muscle groups attaching to them, so they have an affinity for each other. So, if you draw hands like this, it'll always look more natural than if you spread the fingers out like this, and it's a lot easier to draw that way too. So, next up, I'm going to talk about... How's the camera looking right now? Okay, cool. I'm on the right spot. How to take this hand and actually use the principles I'm talking about. So, I'll put a circle here, a circle here, a circle here, a circle here. And I'm going to use the same method in drawing these as I do for basic finger joint stuff, right? You have your ball right there. And this is the ball and socket method. You basically have this ball pointing into that socket, this ball pointing to that socket, and this ball pointing to the tip. And it works for all of them, and it works pretty well. But the thing is, there's a certain uniformity to it. If you really put that shape on, it's got a uniformity to it that makes it look more like, I don't know, like you're designing a hand instead of drawing a hand. Like you're trying to think in terms of how a good robot hand would work. But we're not drawing robot hands, we're drawing people hands, right? So I'm gonna flip this over one more time. Give you one more page of drawing. Let me check, make sure I'm lined up with the camera. Okay, cool. Now, what I do is I gotta keep in mind that if you're looking at the hand from this angle right here, it has an arc to it this way too. So we have our pinky finger, ring finger, middle finger, pointer finger. Now that shape right there, if you can draw that shape from any angle, you can draw a pretty nice hand most of the time. So I'm going to just turn it into a hand real quick. Show you what I'm looking at here. Like that. Okay, that'll work. So we have pretty nice hand. I gotta do some okay hands this way. And the fingernails are typically half the size of that third joint. So if you have your third joint drawn out, whatever the proportion is that you've drawn, half of that is your fingernail. And that works for almost everybody's hands. Like, it might be off by a little bit, but it's not off by enough for you to really make that much of an effort unless you're really focusing on hands. There we go. A little thumb there too. That's a bit of thumb right there. There you go. So there's a joint there, a joint there, a joint there, and a joint there. So what I'm doing here, when I draw these hands, I'll draw another one for you real quick. There's a trick to it that I'm doing that not very many people seem to know about, or maybe we're just keeping it a secret. I don't know, but I'm not keeping it a secret. I'm not thinking in terms of the individual fingers, or even the whole finger for that matter. I'm only thinking about the top plane of the finger. Right there, that's a pretty good hand for how fast I'm drawing, right? Okay, so I'll show you how I'm doing it, how I'm thinking about it. So if you think about your finger as a ball and socket, you got that uniformity that I'm talking about before, right? That's a finger, the ball and socket method. And then you put your flesh over it. Pretty realistic fingers most of the time. You can usually get away with that. It looks kind of creepy, kind of witch-like, but you can make some pretty nice fingers that way. But if you're looking at a ball and socket, you can't really tell what side's the top, what side's the side, or whatever. So what I would say is take it back one step and think about it in terms of being a rectangular prism. Like this, right? It's a rectangular prism. That's a finger. That way, you're keeping a mental image of what part of the finger is what part of the finger. So we have a top of the finger, side of the finger, bottom of the finger, other side of the finger, right? And if it bends, these stay the same. They all stay parallel to each other, no matter what, because your finger only really moves in one direction. So, with that in mind, you only really need to keep in touch with the top or bottom plane of the finger. So I only really worry about the top plane of the finger. So I'm drawing the top plane of the finger. Joint, then top plane right there. Joint, top plane right there. Joint. And then I draw my fingers like that. Cut it in half, gives me my fingernail. Pretty reasonable finger right there. So I think in terms of the top plane of the finger, and then I draw the meat on top of it. That way I know that this part of the joint has to be parallel to this part of the joint. There's no way around that. The axis of this finger will always be parallel to the axis of this part of the finger, unless the finger is broken. There's no other way. And that's because your fingers don't have any muscles in them. There's no muscles in your fingers. You see hand models, none of them have absolutely shredded fingers because all the muscles in your fingers are actually in your forearm. So you grab your wrist like this and then squeeze really hard, it makes your hands move involuntarily. It's kind of cool. That's because all your muscles for your fingers are actually in your forearm. And what they do is they pull tendons and fat and ligament that's already in your fingers. If you break one of those ligaments, you have to get some serious surgery. So please take care of your hands. So I'm going to put it all together. My wire shape with my paying attention to the top plane. So wire shape, which is going to be this right here. If you can draw that shape from any angle, like say if you're looking at it from the side, you can draw a decent hand. If you can sort of, it takes a little bit of practice, but you'll get it. So I'm drawing the top plane of each finger. So I'm gonna bend that finger there, make it kind of dynamic and fun. Remember, these two middle fingers have an affinity for each other. So there's a finger right there, and it's pointed right at us. Went with a really deep, dynamic sort of shape. And even though it's a deep, dynamic shape, it's harder to draw than a regular hand pose. It's not that bad because we're thinking about it in terms of only drawing the top plane, and then we're working around that. You gotta remember the hand bones still do go back in the same direction as they would in any other way. And you gotta remember that the fingers splay out. They aren't straight up and down. They splay out in relation to these bones right here. They follow the direction of the bones. If you forget about that, your hands will look like robot hands, and you'll probably forget why, and that will cause a world of hurt over time. It'll take a long time to figure out. So the best way to go is just remember that the hands splay out. And so about all I've got. So next video, I will teach you how to do posing people.